I've rocked up with 5 guys. The site manager refused to let me on site, onto my own site. I gave that site manager a proper earful. If that goes wrong, you're gonna owe the bank millions. I'm the biggest that you could imagine.
What's the worst deal you think you found?
At some point during your partnership, things are gonna go wrong. That's a guarantee. And I cried. At times I didn't have cash. Just wanted out. Look at me now. I'm a warrior.
Welcome back to another episode of the Property by Kazzy podcast with myself, Kazzy. Each and every week, we're joined by an amazing guest. Today, I have Anthony Laville, founder of Volume Property. How you doing?
I'm good, man.
You're good.
How are you?
See, look, that was very droll. We're not having that today. We're going to get the real Anthony out, the character that I know. We're going to see that from you today.
There you are.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
All right.
So, Anthony, you are a property developer, Birmingham-based. I know I've kind of seen a lot about your background and we're going to get to that, but what is it you're doing right now? Where's your focus?
In terms of property, what? Property or what?
Yeah, in terms of property,
Okay,
where's
cool.
your focus?
Yeah, focus right now is undertaking more projects in the purpose-built student accommodation, co-living and build-to-rent space at large scale, new build, and we're building up a big portfolio.
And
that's where the focus is right now.
For those that don't know, he goes by another name, Mr. Big Deals Only. He said, not dealing with that, the little money. So in terms of big deals only, what did that look like for you and what does that look like going forward?
There's, I'm going to give you a theoretical side and then there's the actual side, right? The absolute side. Theoretically, for me, big deals only just means pushing yourself and pushing your comfort zone. Setting a goal that's so audacious, so big, so uncomfortable that even if you fall short of it, you've achieved something amazing, right? So that's what big deals only is about, pushing your boundaries. That's what the slogan's about. In terms of actual deal size for me, there's probably no upper limit. Most of the deals that we're working on now in terms of gross development value are around the 50 mil GDV mark. We're looking at deals that are double that. So we want to continue around 50 to 150-ish. And if we can pull off a bigger one that's more like a regeneration type project, we'll go for it. But these are big, expensive, hefty projects that take years. So they're the numbers.
Okay, so that's where the big deals come from. So now, when you were starting out, not just starting out, but when your first deal that was in that big deal category, what did that look like?
The first deal that I struck was called Bridge Street Studios, and it was a bit of a mare. It was an industrial building that I found. I went on a viewing. So at the time I had a lettings business and I was in the process of actually shutting that lettings business down. So we had actually stopped taking on new clients. I was trying to work my way out of that business. But there was like this, that one last job. So we got a call in and it was like, oh, maybe we can actually go and look at this building. It was a warehouse being converted into 57 beds from what I remember, student beds. So I thought, I got to have a look at this, even though we're trying to get out the game. This one could be interesting. Went on that viewing. Whilst on that viewing, I saw a property next door to that, and I asked the owner of that property, the one that I was viewing, who owns next door? And he said to me, oh, it's just some guy. I want to buy it one day. And I thought, ooh. So I quickly went about trying to find the owner of the site next door after I left that guy for the day, found his details online, and basically went about striking a deal with the landowner of the site next door. It was an industrial building. I eventually agreed a 400k purchase price with the guy and then took it from there.
And with that, let's just talk about structure, because in terms of getting to whether you're starting out, whether you're in lettings, whether you're in like a similar vocation, but going to do like your first sizable project, did you do an option agreement? Was it subject to planning or was it straight purchase?
So on this one, I wanted to do an option agreement, but in the end, we ended up doing a conditional agreement, conditional contract. And
just for people that are not familiar with that, what's a conditional contract?
So a conditional contract is a legal agreement you have between yourself, the buyer, and the seller. And it's basically saying that you're going to buy the property based on X condition. So the condition for us was getting planning permission first. So if we get planning permission, which is acceptable to us, then we have to buy. Whereas an option gives you the flexibility to walk away whether or not you get planning or not. This conditional contract meant we had to buy basically, or we lose our deposit. But the deposit was only $5,000.
Okay, so deposit to be able to get the conditional contract was $5,000, and I think in that option space or conditional contracts, they can be for as little as £1. It's just a case of what you can negotiate a lot of the time.
Great, yeah, exactly. So what I normally do, I don't mention I'm going to pay them £1. I don't mention anything. So if we're going to enter into an option agreement, you're the seller, I'm going to say, look, can you give me 12 months to get planning permission at my cost? Obviously, you own the site. Nothing's going to change if you own the site. I'm just going to be in the background working on my planning application. Does that work for you? Hopefully you say yes. I then send you the contract and it has £1 on it for the option fee, but I don't tell you I'm going to pay you £1 because that would for most people, that's going to start ringing alarm bells. Like, £1 for what?
Do you remember
when
only
pay me £1?
Luis Suarez, for Liverpool, had a release clause, and his release clause, so Arsenal wanted to buy him, and I think it was whatever it was, 40 million. And his release clause was over 40 million. So we put in a bid at 40 million and £1. But it was the pound was so disrespectful mentally that it was the deal never got done. And I think sometimes when you're talking to people, it's not just what you say, but what you say and how it's perceived is just as important.
That's exactly why I position it that way. So when they do question it, if they ever question it, sometimes, a lot of the time they don't question it. If they do, you just go, oh, it just makes it legal.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm paying for the planning application. That's going to cost me $100,000.
Yeah.
And then it's usually okay.
So with that one, so you went about. Then did you get your planning within your 12 months?
So fortunately, yes, that was one of the best ones. Got planning in 10 months.
Okay.
So put the 5K down. I wanted to pay nothing, by the way, but we negotiated 5K. Took 10 months to get planning, and then we went to buy the site. So planning came, got planning permission, called up the seller. Great news, I've been approved. And then the seller said, "I'm not selling my building to you. I don't like what you've done." I was like, "What are you talking about? I've done what we said we were going to do. We're going to get planning." And he said, "No, speak to my lawyer." So then the lawyer started to engage, and long story short, he was just trying to get, worm his way out of the deal, because he'd realised now there'd been a jump in value from what the site is now to now having a consented site. So
and
there you are.
I think at any level of property, for those your contracts underpin your business and what you're doing. So if you're starting out as a deal sourcer, your contract is where your money is. If your contract's no good, you can't get paid. If you're in rent to rent and you have a contract with a landlord, if your lease agreement is no good, they can back out of it. So I think it's kind of a lesson for everybody, whether it's a deal for £500 profit or, potentially £5 million profit. Make sure you get, you dot your I's and you cross your T's when it comes to your contract. And that's not an area that you want to skimp on. And your lawyers as well, collectively.
Well, do you know what else is important when it comes to that is ensuring that the other side has legal representation.
Yeah. Because
if you've had legal representation, which you should on one of these agreements, if you've not used that agreement before, you definitely need proper legal representation. If there's a potential case for them to argue that they didn't know what they were signing.
Exactly.
And so you don't want to get in that situation. So you want to ensure they have legal representation, you have it, and then there's no confusion then, or shouldn't be any claim at the end.
Exactly. So in terms of structure then, so you've now 10 months on, you've got planning, you're like, okay, right. So based on planning now, there's obviously an uplift, which is why the vendor wasn't happy in the value of the site. So what does that mean in terms of how much money you have to put in day one to secure the site now? Because it's worth a lot more than you'd agree to pay for it.
Yeah, so for me, the planning application cost around somewhere between £60,000 and £70,000. I had a little bit of money for my business, or my lettings business from over the years. So I put up half that money, and I put a guy that I partnered with, who was actually a client in my lettings business, a developer, put the other half up for the planning application. And when it came time to buy the site, he bought the site, he had cash, and I didn't have the cash to buy the site. So in my instance, it was pretty unique. So it was pretty cool. The agreement was he'd put up the money to buy the site, and then I paid him a bit of interest, cash, and we owned the site equally. Okay. And he gets his money back.
I guess because in terms of structure, I guess because the site had quite a significant uplift, potentially, depending on what that uplift was and how that looks to the bank, potentially you still could have funded the actual site.
I've done that before.
Yeah.
So on previous sites, I've got planning secured the site there was one site I bought for, agreed at 290k, very cheap. When I got planning, it was worth £1 million. And I got over financing. So I got financing for 400 grand from a private lender. So they fully financed it, plus lent additional money to help demolish the building, to fund demolition. So
that's it. So I think
it's value.
Yeah, it's all about creating value again in property. At the moment, we're technically in like a technical recession, but it doesn't mean there isn't money in property. It's all about, like anything in business, how you create that value. So that was the first project. How long did it take from sort of starting out, breaking ground to, I guess, two questions. How long did it take from starting out to being finished? And then how long from being finished to like stabilizing the asset as sort of like,
Oh man, that took a while. So that project was wasn't actually the first project that I finished construction of. It was the first big project that I went for. I secured that site in 2017, attempted to start construction in 2018, didn't work out because our plans were not very good. They weren't very efficient, so we had to go back into planning again. We ended up getting more units and getting rid of this basement that they'd built, which was very expensive as part of the plans, another lesson. And then 2019, thought we could go for construction. Missed the academic year because we were too late. Eventually started construction in 2020. Contractor goes bust. Had to start again in 2021. Towards the end of 2020. And delays during 2021. I think we delivered it for 2020.
That's obviously COVID as well.
COVID and everything else that came. I think we delivered that at the end of, I think it was 2022 in the end, from memory, or 2021. Wow.
So that's sort of
4 years. 2021 we delivered it.
4 years.
So it's mad.
So on that one, when that was like your first big project, so as a fly just attacking.
I know, I've seen it. It's been over here.
Yeah, it's round. But that would be in your first big project, like you're stepping out of, because you were kind of stepping out of the property space, looking at something else. Was there ever a time during that space that you thought, yeah, this is too much?
Yeah. A few times I just wanted out, especially once we got planning, because planning was relatively the easy bit, right? And there was a few times like, no, we need to sell this. And there's a few times me and my partner came together, like, all right, let's sell it. Because it was just like, cash was getting tight at times. I didn't have cash from other ventures because I was shutting my business down. So I was putting myself in a bit of a position. So at times I was like cash hungry, and other times it's getting a bit much, let's just sell. But a big part of me wanted to build, but just circumstances at time felt like it was best to shift.
What allowed you to push on during those difficult times?
Definitely the desire for I knew there was millions of pounds in it if I built it, and I knew if I sold it as it is, there was hundreds of thousands of pounds. And so
monetary. Was there ever anything from I want to do this as kind of to set my mark because you know what's coming later if you can do something big? Or was it at that point, was it just like, look, there's a lot of money here and I need to get to that money?
Do you know, it wasn't, good question. It wasn't just financially driven. A big part of it was seeing it through. I found the site, I negotiated a deal, I ran the whole architectural thing with the whole planning application, led the architect and the whole team, did all the work, and it was like, how can I not see this through to the end? Do you know what I mean? But on the first project I finished, and it was a similar battle. It was a similar battle. Various things went wrong, and then you had to battle your way through. And then I eventually got it finished and refinanced, and I cried. Because it just, do you know, the hard work it took.
You just felt like that was the accumulation of years of hard work, years of headache, people
pain,
messing up,
wanting to sell it at times, people messing me around, not performing, missing the academic year or being late or whatever it is. And it was like a relief. It was like a bit of relief and a bit of proving it to myself.
Guess, there's that like a nation of I've done this. Yeah, like I can say I'm done now. Like I've reached that initial peak of now it's just on to the next one.
It's almost like what's that MMA fighter from Brum? God, Leon Edwards.
Yeah.
You know what he's saying? Look at me now.
Yeah.
And tears are coming down.
Yeah.
It's like that. It was the same thing. It's like,
okay, like you've been
you've been through it, and it's not like I'm upset. It's like I'm a warrior. It's warrior tears. You know what I mean? That's what it was like.
Yeah, no, it is. It's interesting because I think like that is like when I looked at your bio and looked at your background and we speak about like entrepreneurs, there's often like a lot of common denominators in that it's the being able to go through the struggle that really separates you from everybody else because that was your first big project. And like, how did you have the confidence to say, actually, I'm going to lead this? Like, so in terms of, I'm going to lead the architects, I'm going to lead construction. I think from our conversations and when I've come to meet you on site, you're very much involved at like a top level as opposed to just...
Now I am.
Yeah.
So on the first deal that I struck, the first one I mentioned, it was important for me to partner with a developer. I didn't want to do it by myself because I just knew there was too much that I didn't know. I didn't want to get myself in a situation where it was just a precarious situation where, what do I do? Who do I turn to? And so I knew that someone on my side of the table, both invested, both of we completely aligned, would work in my favor. And so by the time I did a deal after that, it wasn't as bad then and I wanted to lead the process. So when I say I did all the work, I wanted to do all the work. I wanted to fully understand. Now, if you ask the guy I partnered with, who's still a partner now on that same site, we're still on it together. That's the only deal we've done together. If you ask him now, who's the better developer or key developer, he'd say me. Like he's got more hands-on construction experience of various smaller projects. But in terms of being a proper developer, he'd point to me because development at this scale is not like building two new build houses. It's like it's the worlds apart, complete worlds apart, and the approach. So now I get to have a bit more high level approach.
Where do you think the differences lie between, like, for example, a small anywhere from 2 to 10 unit scheme versus a 50 to 250 unit scheme in terms of key differences?
It's interesting because I think 10 to 50 is a bigger jump than 50 to 250. I think 50 to 250 is less than 10 to 50.
Why do you say that?
The scale and the amount of things that you have to do and the team, the contracts, the planning, the preparation that you have to put in place on the bigger project is very different to the smaller project. You need a lot more resource team. I mean, anything from ground, anything from ground up to superstructure to getting your engineers involved. It's a bit of a minefield, and there's a lot more regulations as the buildings get bigger.
Which one are you saying? Because before you said you feel the smaller one is harder, but you're saying the bigger ones.
No, I'm saying to jump from 10 units to 50 units is harder than to jump from 50 units to 250.
Yeah. Okay.
Even though it's 5 times the size.
Yeah. No,
well, it's still 5 times the size, but in terms of the amount, 250 apartments, right? It's crazy. But I'm saying that jump's bigger because the way you structure a deal and the way you run the 50 apartment project is a similar way you do it for 250. In 10, you could probably be a bit more scrappy with it. You can probably get, your local builder, you buy all the materials in, you source all the materials separately. Like, can you imagine sourcing materials yourself for 250 flats?
Yeah, I think like
sourcing all the tiles, sourcing all the taps, sourcing all the
I think
fix.
When I broke it down before and you looked at it, it's that the difference of larger scale projects is, like I said, 10 units, you can, potentially source it all and do a lot of stuff yourself or use like more of a local team. Whereas with a larger project, that job of sourcing materials, your M&E, your second fix is a job in itself.
Yeah.
The job of like all your partitions, the job of all your soundproofing, all of these things are jobs in themselves. So because there's enough margin in it, there's enough money in the deal, you can afford to employ the professionals at each levels and have that level of, I guess, middle management and accountability, I guess, throughout your projects.
And you've also got to have the specialism. You want a specialist running that package and a subcontractor doing that because the price will be better. They'll be more efficient. They'll know what they're doing a lot more than a generalist. It's very difficult to find. They don't exist. An entity that does all of it, they don't exist. It's too big.
And also, you always pay a premium. If you have someone that does everything, you pay a premium because they're gonna. they're not going to do all of it. They're going to subcontract, and then they're going to put a margin on top of everything. So
and that's the problem. That is the issue with the larger construction projects. The amount of subcontractors involved is ridiculous. So there's so much margin being lost. So you can go to your petitions guy, right? And they could have 2 further subcontractors under them. And so that's margin being lost that you're paying for as the employer, as the client. It's mad.
So actually, you went straight into student accommodation. Was it purely because of seeing the site you saw already? Or did you have any type of affinity that that's where you wanted to go into?
So I started a lettings business when I was a student at uni. So when I started that lettings business, it was basically finding students for landlords. And so when I graduated, I did that full time. I jumped into it full time. So I knew a lot more about the market. So it's because I was comfortable in that market anyway.
Okay. And then in terms of holding assets, were you always looking to do build to rent, or did you ever want to flip? Like where does your kind of preference lie there?
Do you know what? When I was running these companies, and at times I was strapped of cash, I just thought, never again. How do I get myself to a position where I've got big amounts of cash coming in on a monthly, regular basis? What can I do? And that's when I thought, well, I need to own it. And you could be a letting agent and you could be managing 1,000 properties, but if 400 of those properties are with one client and that client decides to sell and take management elsewhere, you probably lost potentially 40% of your income. You've had it. You have to let staff go. Your pay drops. Those holidays may have to cut that. I mean, your life changes. But if you own the assets and you sell those assets, well, hopefully there's a gain there and there's a windfall. So even if you've lost a regular income, and that's what I got to in my management business, like, well, hang on, we even did rent to rent. I thought at the end of it, if it sells, I lose my income. So how am I going to, so I knew that I had to own, and I knew I wanted big cash flow, and it was like, well, it's got to be big deals. And the cheapest way for me to own big stuff is to build it. That was the case anyway. Slightly different now when you're looking at certain sites.
Yeah. No, and I think it's funny. I have conversations with some developers and you look at stuff and you're like, your land value is actually 0 because it costs so much to build. And it's weird. You've got planning.
Negative.
You've got, so it's like, just keep it as a car park, mate.
Yeah. But pay me £1 million and I'll take it off your hands.
There we go. So obviously you transitioned from, I know that you're going to do a lot of podcasts and a lot of people are going to ask you about where you started from, but I know all of that. And that's not that's like a bit boring for me. You've done that. A lot of people have done that. What you're doing is different. So I want to talk about what you're doing now, how you've managed to, achieve it. So you've said, I want to hold assets, gone into the student accommodation space, but your first deal was with a partner. Like, do you have any tips for, if you are JVing with somebody, what to look out for? What are red flags, green flags, for example?
Definitely. One, at some point during your partnership, things are going to go wrong. That's a guarantee. And so you want to make sure you're working with people that are amenable. Yes, they may be successful in their own field, so they may be strong-willed or strong-minded, but there need to be people that you think you can get along with. So I'd say that's number one. Make sure it's someone that you get a feel for. If they're new, try and meet mutual contacts or someone else that knows them and try and get some references or get a feel on who they are. I think that's number one for the partner. And outside of that, it's kind of like, well, yeah, obviously they've got to have, if they're bringing money to the table, for instance, you got to make sure they've got the funds that are liquid and not tied up or related, tied up in a deal and then all of a sudden it holds up your deal and you're in a pickle. Outside of that, what else is there? You want to get a feel for their sort of style. I've had partners in the past that have been a bit of in a nice way, a nuisance. They're just on your back a bit. And you need someone that's gonna understandably want to hold you to account, but also let you get on it.
Let you do you. I saw this funny sign the other day, and it was like for a web developer, and they were like, we design £1,000. We design and you help £2,000. You design and we help £3,000. And it's because sometimes just let me be the specialist. Because you're not adding anything when all you're doing is saying, but my uncle's cousin's sister said actually those windows could be a bit smaller. It's like
It's causing more problems.
if we've agreed that I'm delivering the project, of course we have the updates, whether it's, you know, monthly, weekly, whatever the case you've agreed is. But outside of that, let's just keep a structure.
Do you know what helps? If you are picking a partner, if you can choose the aspects I mentioned, but in addition to that, try and get someone that's well funded, and that this isn't if this is their life savings, they're more likely to be on your case. Whereas if this is just another investment for them, yes, they think it's important to them, but they're less likely to be on your back. And it's the same thing with when I had the lettings company, the landlords that were the most nuisance were the landlord with one house, and the landlord with 20 houses were a bit easier going. Yes, they'd want you to perform, but there'd be a lot less pressure from them than a person with one house, because a lot is hinged on the success of that letting of that one property, which is why there's so much pressure. It's the same thing with investors. I think make sure it's not an investor who, you know, they've worked 10 years for 100 grand and they've just lost their job. There's no other money coming in for them. They're on their last legs, but they're thinking that this 100 grand of you is going to work out. I think I'd be a bit more wary of those than ones that have a lot more cash.
Fair enough. And then just to stay on the topic of partners, because in different backgrounds, different cultures, a lot of people kind of preach that they want to own it on their own. They want to do it by themselves. You, throughout your journey, have regularly partnered with people. Was there ever a time where you said, you know, I don't want partners anymore, or do you always enjoy having, you know, another partner on board?
I own properties by myself. I think it's important to have some stuff yourself, just for for your own security. Outside of that, partnerships changed the game for me, because I can't. There's two ways, right? So you can either be in a very lucrative professional business that's throwing you off a lot of cash, and then you use those resources to put into property, right? Or the other way generally is to raise funds. Because I didn't have that other source of business throwing off crazy amounts of cash. Like I've got, these are multi-million-pound projects. So I needed something throwing off a lot of cash, millions of pounds of cash to help fund my property ambitions. And because I didn't have that, I had to raise money. And so partnerships worked extremely well for me, because I was happy to do all the work and the right person's happy to get a return on their money. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's just more I think sometimes speaking to people, a lot of people are very much like, I only want to do what I can do by myself, which means maybe they'd rather 100% of a little than maybe 50% of a lot. But I just wondered if there was something in your upbringing, something in maybe life experience.
No, I used to think, no, let me own it myself. And I had the lettings company myself. No, but yeah, I'm all for splitting it. I'm all for sharing it. Something I wouldn't accept, unless it's very unique circumstances, very unique, is if it's my core business, my main business, where I'm spending all of my time and attention, I want a strong element of control over that. So what I did in my property business, volume's owned by just me, but the individual projects I'd partner on. And so I had protection. So let's say I had, 5 different partners. If one of them's not working out and that one's going to pot, at least I've got 4 others that I can continue and build relationships with. Whereas if they were my partner on all 5 projects,
so diversification,
I'd be at risk. So you can even diversify the partners, but you can only go so far. Some people are fortunate to have a lot of cash and can do it, but then who's running the cash generative business whilst doing the property thing? I think it's difficult to do both.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So in terms of projects now, what's been your favorite project today or favorite acquisition?
My favorite one's always the current one.
Which is?
So right now we're working on, would you believe, Volume Works Phase 3. So this is a development I've gone on a lot about on my socials. So people want to check it out on my Instagram. So this scheme has morphed from what I thought was going to be a £5 million single project to now it's looking like potentially a £70 million deal. It's mad. So it's we're just about to hopefully we get planning soon on the 3rd phase.
Okay, which is phase 1 and 1's definitely completed. Is 2 completed?
Phase 1 and 2 is done.
Phase 1 and 2 are done.
That's 156 beds. and including phase 3, it takes it to well over 400. So this is like institutional level, institutional grade stock where the likes of LNG will want to buy it, say. So it gets really interesting. So that's a cool one because I didn't see it working out to that level. It just kind of, I did that deal and then, okay, I can buy next door. And then that one was coming up, let me try and do that. And then all of a sudden it's morphing into this
and do you know
beast.
What? It's funny. I feel like I've said this on the last 3 podcasts I've done, but some people, if you tell that story in short form, would look at you and say, Anthony got lucky because you started off with a deal. But whether it's with your small little buying a buy-to-let property, whether you're buying something to flip, whether you're doing large-scale developments, luck doesn't find you on your sofa. It finds you when you're out being proactive.
Active.
And sometimes the deal isn't the unicorn deal that's the best deal in the world, but by being out there, you build relationships with that landowner, with the potential investor, with the other developers, and people start to know your name, and closed mouths don't get fed. So the more you speak about what you're doing, the more you're actively doing what you want to do, the more likely you are to attract those opportunities. And I think that's exactly what's transpired there. So that was your favorite deal. We got to go to the bad. What's the worst deal you think you found or done? Or maybe not done. Maybe you got to run away from it. I don't know.
Oh, worst deal.
It could be for any reason. It doesn't have to be financial. It could just be for the way it
I'll tell you,
worked
but you know the one where the contract went bust?
Yeah.
That was not fun because I physically ended up going on site to run that myself. This is like 70 flats of 70 student flats. So it's not a small scheme. And you got all these subbies and that. And like, you know, at times I'm the nice guy. At times I'm an absolute monster. I'm the biggest that you could imagine, right? Because like these guys, there's one, so whilst that contractor, and this is the thing, right? I can be really active when I need to. So when that contractor was getting into trouble, you know, we can see it. The work slowing down on site, progress is slow.
Yeah, you're going from X amount of people to
there's not
less
as many
people on site.
Yeah, there's not as many people on site. There's big telltale signs, right?
All of a sudden you start receiving invoices that you shouldn't really get.
Yeah, it's
yet.
like, hang on, this valuation doesn't look quite right. It looks like you're pricing too much work in here. So that we're getting telltale signs. So I had some other guys, professionals, property professionals, like surveyors and everything else, lined up to come and view the site. I said, and I gave the contractor notice. I said, look, I've got a site visit. I'm bringing some guys around. We're just coming to look at the site. Because I wanted their opinion. I wanted a professional. I knew it wasn't right. I wanted a professional review. So I've rocked up on site now with 4 or 5 guys. And the site manager refused to let me on site with these guys onto my own site. Imagine that. These guys are behind, delayed, looking like they're about to go bust, and they're refusing to let you onto your own site that you've got a personal guarantee against. If that goes wrong, you're going to owe the bank millions personally in a personal capacity. And he's telling me I can't come onto site. Long story short, we got on site, right? So I gave that site manager a proper earful, and it was quite funny. I looked behind me. You know, the guys that had brought with me, they were just like this. I was like, gents, come on site. So we done a site tour, finished the site tour, and then they gave us the review, right? Yeah, it's a mess. Health and safety's a mess. This has been installed wrong. That looks incorrect. This, that. So it was like, so that was a bad experience. And then we finally, my partner on it had this big idea of us finishing the build. He was going to lead it. That didn't go well, and it culminated with me coming on site for the last 3 months or so. And so that whole experience was not good, but it worked out in the end. We've got it rented. It pulls in a lot of rent, and so we're, you know.
And I guess the reality is, I bet you learned more from that stressful deal than you did with some of the ones that were smooth sailing. Because
do you know what? In a way, yeah. I knew I never wanted to build it.
Yeah.
I knew the contractor was going wrong, so I wanted him gone. So you do learn a lot.
But I get you would learn.
It's a
you learn the additional due diligence when it comes to contractors.
Oh, sorry, you're right.
Like that.
No, that's right.
You'd just learn in terms of attention to detail and look, just those checkups, like trust your gut. Like when you could tell things were going wrong, he could have potentially strung you out if you didn't get the experts on board to give you that second opinion to back up what you already thought. So I think sometimes in business, in property, we know what we know, but we just need that sounding board of somebody else to just be like, no, you know what, Anthony, you're actually right here, to give you the confidence to go and pull the trigger and make a decision.
Do you know what though? In fairness, I know a lot more about construction detail now on a bigger scheme because of that.
Yeah.
You know, when I got there, there's a lot of things were exposed. I mean, like, steel beams. I had to instruct the guys to finish the wall build up, and like we're talking, rooms had nothing, right? Bathroom pods went in. It's just all. So you do learn a lot hands on. I wouldn't say I'm not a contractor level, right? But I've got a lot more technical knowledge because of it.
Do you know what's weird from like what I realized from being on sites is that you might not know everything, but if you're on site enough, you know when it looks wrong and you know when to ask a question. I think that as long as you know when to say, what's going on there?
What's happening there? Yeah.
And somebody has to then justify what's going on, it gives you enough to take that answer back to a specialist or an expert. There's two things that are interesting that you touched on with the explanation of that story. The first was the importance of having other people in a similar space or industry professionals around you. And, a lot of people, there's a common phrase like your network is your net worth. But how were you able to build those relationships over time?
The ones that came with me were ones that I've used on other jobs. So in that time, that project going wrong over the years, I started other projects. Yeah. So I roped in some of the others from other projects, basically. And
I guess somebody maybe starting out a bit earlier in their journey, like what would you recommend in terms of being around the type of people that are going to be, you're going to be mutually beneficial to each other?
I think it's what you said earlier about being active. You've got to be active and doing stuff. So if you're out there trying to do deals, you're naturally going to mingle and network with those people. So you can go to networking events. You can join the Property by Kaz community and other things like that, right? Because there's going to be people in there active, and you're going to see them actively doing deals. That's going to spur you on. You'll meet them, and hopefully you'll be discussing business and things that you both relate to, because not everyone in your immediate circle or space is into what you're into. And it's one of the things I think, I would say I struggled with. I never really vibed with anyone like that growing up. There was never really anyone that was on like a really, I've been on a business tip from a very young age. I've always wanted to own a business. I always wanted to grow a big business. And I never really had those people around that. So we could never vibe on that level. If it was football related, we vibe with football. If it was like playing out with friends, there was no one that kind of I aligned with in that respect as a friend. And I've only made those friends in the past 10 years in business.
That's interesting.
Business related friends.
So how do you feel like with your level of success, what's been like maybe good or bad experiences you've had with like older school friends? Like what's been their attitudes towards it?
So I'm cool, I never really, the friends that I've got are the good ones that are left, right? So I've never had issues like that. I've never had like, this person wants favors or this person like, if anyone reaches out to me, one of my friends from years ago, and they need a favor, they're getting the favor. Like they'll never take advantage like that. So I've been all right. I've never had a negative experience because I always adjusted my friendship at the time.
Interesting. And what about, I guess now that you've got a higher level of exposure with building a large profile on social media, how have you found that? Is it still very positive, or the experience on social media as a whole? Overall,
it's great. This is why I'm here, and I'm looking to increase the level of content that I put out. Sometimes it's a nuisance, right? Sometimes, like I had one deal where the guy was trying to squeeze me for more money. We'd agreed a deal, and he just wanted more money out of me, basically. I said no, and he said, I've seen your Instagram. I saw how much you made in that development. blah, 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 blah. That was one time I put numbers out on a development, and I've never done it since, and I'll never do it again. I don't mind giving GDVs and maybe even develop, but I'm not going to give profits and stuff.
Do you know what's weird
it
about
works against
property?
you.
It's one of the only places people feel comfortable to ask you, what do you make?
Yeah, what do you make?
So like, because somebody will turn around, like, oh, Anthony, you just bought this building. You'll be like, yeah, I bought the building. How much you pay for it? Oh, I paid £1 million. How much you spend on it? Oh, I paid £2 million. How much you sell it for? 5 million. So you made 3 million. Like, you don't do that in other businesses.
It's not
you don't go to the butchers and be like, how much you pay for that cow? How many like steaks did you know what I mean? It's not like, but in property, it's just very,
it's like free game.
It's standard. You could just say whatever you want, which is weird, but I don't mind it, to be fair.
It's all right. I think sometimes when people ask that, I think it depends on who asks it and how they ask it. But it's like, how is it serving you? It doesn't really serve you in the way that
it doesn't necessarily, because it's not context based as well. Because
exactly.
What if I made £200,000? What if the deal took 3 years? What if you don't understand about all the finance costs involved?
Yeah.
Because if you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the right answer anyway. And then there's loads of people that put, numbers out, bought this for this, sold it for this. And you think, there's not really any money in that, is there? If you say there's a lot of sensationalized stuff. So I think if you are looking at, like, if you're overly focused on numbers, just focus on your own, and that's the best place to kind of keep your focus if you're looking at numbers.
I think some people like it because it feels a lot more real, and it's like, okay, how did it actually work out for you? I think that's cool, but I think you've got to do some other work in the background to try and work that.
And then focusing like specifically on student accommodation, what's been like the response from like local councils? Because I'm guessing like you're obviously providing affordable housing effectively. So has it been a good response? Have you had any backlash? Because sometimes landlords do get a bad name.
When you say affordable,
when I say affordable, in that you're helping them provide like a level of accommodation that they're not building out themselves, and obviously because they're students otherwise potentially eating into the residential home stock with HMOs. So I would guess the councils like you quite a lot.
I think I don't know about that. I think
they don't like you.
I don't think they dislike me. But I just think we're potentially, and I think this is how they view most developers. I think unless you're doing a really big, massive regeneration project, in my opinion, I think to the councils, a developer's just a developer, like everyone else. Yes, you kind of help with the housing, but they're stretched. That's the problem. They're under-resourced, most of these councils. So unless you've got a project that's like a big regeneration project or something that's on an arterial route of really of serious interest to the council, I think you're just another project for them. So unless it stands out, let's say it's a prime site in the city centre, it may not be huge, but it's an eyesore and it doesn't look good for the city, I think they'll be keen to work with you then. Or it's a really big site that's going to change things. But otherwise, I just think they treat you like every other developer. You can have me, and I've met loads of heads of a bunch of different councils. You can meet the senior people. You can hopefully, if you're not quite happy with how the application's going, you don't think you're being treated fairly, you can give someone a call, drop them an email, and that can help to progress it a bit. And that helps when you're working on the larger projects. But I think because they're so under-resourced and stretched, which I feel for them, it's just certain projects get more priority than others.
Yeah, it's just another day at work for them.
I
just
think
a case
so.
of
Fair,
that's interesting. I think, do you know?
I think most developers would just say the same.
Think about that, right? But I think you're probably
I
right.
speak to developers all the time, right? Big developers, small developers, and one of the key things I ask them is about planning. Like, what's your experience in planning? I don't know anyone having a positive experience.
Yeah,
I met with some of the guys at Blackstone. So Blackstone's like the biggest real estate owner in the world. They don't like planning. If they have a nightmare with planning in the UK, and they're a big real estate owner in the UK, and all these developers I speak to, then what am I gonna? I'm no different. Sadly, you just got to battle through.
Fair enough. Okay, let's ask you some interesting quick fire questions.
Fire.
These are just more design based, but you got some really nice. I've seen some really, really fun stuff going on. So give me quick answers. You're building new student accommodation. You get a choice of one: gym or cinema room.
Gym.
Okay. In like the sort of hangout area, pool table or table tennis.
Table tennis.
Okay. In the rooms themselves, white walls or feature color.
White walls.
Okay. Rooms, carpet or laminate flooring?
Laminate.
Okay. Pendant light or spotlight?
Spot.
Okay, just had to see where you were at design wise. All right, that's the end. That's the end of our
All
quick
right,
fire
cool.
game. We can see in the comments. Let me see how much you agree with Anthony. What did you say out of gym or cinema room?
Gym. Do you know what my answers are not just design led, sadly.
Yeah.
They're like maintenance and long term operation and what are they actually using.
So that's where the white walls you thought. Yeah.
No, I'd prefer feature, but it's like white walls. Like, so what we do, if you've maybe seen on some of ours, we do some feature walls, but sometimes we put like a really big hotel style. Well, a lot of the time, hotel style headboarding.
Yeah.
And that breaks up that wall. So it doesn't look like a complete white wall. It's actually like a white wall with a nice section of grey, and it actually looks quite nice in contrast. So I try and use other methods because then it gets quite messy and expensive with the paint and then paint everywhere. And then white, the white paint, you can, if it's a nice water-based paint, you can paint a little section and it blends in.
Yeah.
It's mad, isn't it? But you try and do that on the colour paint, it doesn't. It's difficult to blend.
Yeah, because
so you got to paint the whole. You got to paint the whole wall again, and our students may be leaving at least once a year.
No, it makes sense.
So that's the maintenance
unfortunately,
side. That's the operation side.
Exactly. Fair enough.
And the pendant I like.
You like a pendant.
But the maintenance side is like, well, then I've got to change that bayonet bulb. Then I've got to change the bulb. then the lampshade gets dusty. So I don't want to really do that. Whereas the spotlight is in the ceiling. They last for a few years on LED. So I don't really want to change those. And it's fixed.
Hey, so it's very functional over aesthetic in terms of
it's a mixture.
In the short term.
It's a mixture.
But I guess you leave the aesthetic to those that obviously do your interior design to blend the functionality with the aesthetic. So for a lot of people, I think they struggle with how they would get from, whether it be running a letting business, whether it be leaving, whatever their full-time vocation is with some capital, to go in to do a deal of substance. What would you say are your sort of top tips? I think you've recently started a program where people can potentially work or get some assistance alongside you. Is that right?
Yeah. So look, if you're reviewing a deal, first of all, stay in your job. Don't quit your job. That's madness, right? Stay in your job for as long as possible. The first thing we're going to do when we're looking for a potential site is work out what can we build on that site. We need a feasibility study done. Normally you go to an architect who's going to come back and say, right, you found this plot of land. I think you can build 10 apartments. Great. What do you now do with this? You've got potential feasibility study. This is telling you can build 10 apartments on this plot of land that you found. You're then going to approach the planning consultant. The planning consultant's going to tell you, actually, yes, you can build 10 apartments, but you need to be aware of this policy because in this area you need affordable housing or this, that. So that's going to give you an idea of how many units you can build, what you can build, and does it match up policy. Then you need to go to an agent to give you values. What's it going to be worth? And then speaking with a few professionals like contractors, you're going to find out build costs and some of your other development costs. And then you're going to get into this idea of, right, this is a desktop appraisal. I found a site. Here's my initial review of it. Can I pay what this seller wants? Bang. But yeah, you're right. I guide people. So there's a select group that I'm working with who have applied, and I've started with this small group that we're basically taking through the steps of how to approach the development. It's a bit of a minefield, and it's just like I recognized when I started out, I had to partner. It's just there's a lot to take in.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think if people need assistance, a lot of the time it's best coming from somebody who knows what they would have wanted when they were starting out. And I think that's obviously, you mentioned a lot of steps there. And obviously you can watch YouTube videos. There's an abundance of content out there for free and you can really absorb it. But if you want to get that streamlined directly where you're not going to make those costly mistakes, it can be good to have somebody in place that's, whether it's your sounding board, just to make sure you're on the right track, or to give you direction or to link you with contacts. I think it can always be really valuable.
I genuinely wish, to me, that would have been worth hundreds of thousands of pounds easy at the time. I wish I had someone give me a bit of direction, genuinely. And I think definitely for your group, I think people in your group, in your community, I think they're getting an absolute bargain.
I know. Anthony keeps trying to tell me to put the price up.
I think you're getting a bargain.
If you see the price go up, Play man, play, but we're not for now. We're good.
But it's worth it.
Do you know what it is? I'm just, and again, you know this when we have some conversations, but I'm genuinely buzzing off like when I go and see people that like says this girl, I don't know kind of name. I'm not gonna name her today, but like so she actually used to be an estate agent, sold quite a few of my flats, got amazing money for them, and she 10, 12 years of experience, have been doing it for a long time and always been talking, I want to get into development, I'm not sure. Then when I started the group, she's like, yeah, I've seen it, but I don't think I'm ready yet. I don't think it's going to be for me. And I'm saying, hey, she's like, you've actually got value to add to the group. Like, you're not just joining it on I hope I can get some help. You're going to help other people because you've got a lot of experience. This morning, I was like, I was driving on my way to an appointment. I was like, let me pop in. She's bought her first deal to flip this year. She was in there planning her kitchens, planning her bathrooms. I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, you smashed it. This is going to be great. And we had like a literal 5-minute conversation. She's got a lease extension to do. She was planning to pay for it out of her own money. I know that lender. They'll fund 75% of it. You just got to tell them what it is and get it pre-agreed. So that saved her 45K on a lease extension in terms of money that she has to put in. So when I see stuff like that and she's buzzing, grinning ear to ear, like I love it.
Do you know, I just want to say this, and that is the exact point. There's a guy that I met recently who's investing with a popular Instagram property guy. And this guy was saying to me, I'm not happy. I've put in almost 100 grand into this guy's deal. He's doing all the work, but it's all my money. I'm like, all right, so explain to me what's going on then. What's happening? He's like, yeah, I put my money in. I'm going to get my money back out. And then he owns it equally with me, and then we split the profits. I said, so when did you get your money? When did you put your money in and when did you get it out? It's going to be less than a year. Okay, I said, okay, cool. So you get your money in, and is that all of your money or some of your money? All of my money. So I'm going to get all my money back out in less than a year. Okay, so you get all your money back out in less than a year. And what do you have to do? No, I don't have to do anything. He does that. I said, so where's the bad deal then?
Yeah, I think,
like it makes it.
Do you know what? I think a lot of the time it's like the friend in someone's ear. Like a lot of the time it's like, oh, there, whatever, without really understanding what goes into being able to deliver a deal or understand what, or be able to get your money back.
Yeah, they don't understand it because the nuances. Because I'm like, do you understand that guy? And I know the guy. I was like, do you know how many refurbs he's done? How many issues he would have had? You installed those fire doors, they're done wrong. Take those fire doors out, put some new ones in. The lender doesn't like that issue. The lender doesn't like this. The lender doesn't like that. The valuer doesn't like this. So he knows exactly what property to buy and what location, how much the refurb is, how to deal with the builder, how to deal with any issues with the lenders, preempt those issues. Like, do you understand what that's worth? And you're going to get an infinite return in less than a year. You've got all your money back.
And I think it's hard. Potentially have learned how to do it going forward for yourself.
And then you can potentially do it yourself.
So I think a lot of the time, it's just about finding that right person that works for you and with you with any type of joint venture, any type of partnership. It's just got to make sense.
But at the end of the conversation, he's like, do you know what? You've changed my mind, Anthony. I think I'm going to do another one. And I was like, good. Do another one. There's nothing. But he had a main business. But yeah, I think what I'm saying is there's so much unique experiences that you have that won't necessarily dawn on them, but you can, in one conversation, make them or save them tons of money.
Because property is expensive and mistakes are just as expensive.
Yeah, big time.
That's it. So it's been a great podcast, Anthony. How can people connect with you, find with you, let them know anything that's going on? This is your time to shine. Dash your camera. Let's go.
So I'm on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. I'm everywhere. So it's Anthony Laville. Hopefully there's somewhere that they're going to put my little tags on. Connect to me, DM me, follow me. The more comments I get, the more I'm going to post. Pleasure.
It's a pleasure, man. So that's been another episode of the Property by Kazi podcast. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, like this video. If you've got any questions, ask us in the comment section. I'll go and drag Anthony off his, £1 million, £100 million, £1 billion pending site soon to get him to come and answer all your questions. So we appreciate you and we catch you next week for another amazing episode.